This is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at Diamine Onyx Black. Now, since this is just a basic black ink that would be common to use in a classroom setting, I've switched up my lineup of pens a little bit to include some entry-level, inexpensive pens that you might see a student using. Now, this time they range from a Pilot Extra Fine to a Jinhao medium. I'm going to begin with my Pilot 78G with an extra fine nib. Now, this feels pretty nice considering this is an extra fine nib, and the legibility is nice since it's a nice dark black ink. So yeah, very usable with this needle point extra fine nib. Next, I've got a Pilot Metropolitan with a fine nib. Now, this Metropolitan did not come with a fine nib on it. It came with a cursive medium, but I imagine it would be more common to use a fine nib in a classroom setting, a note-taking situation. So I switched out nibs. The good thing about these, the Metropolitan and the Kakuno and the 78G, they're all inexpensive pens and the nibs are interchangeable. Now, this is the nib that came in my Pilot Prera, which, especially here in the United States, is a little bit more expensive than you would expect to see, or I would expect to see a student using in the classroom. But the Prera, depending on where you get it, can be, considered a decent student pen. Let's see, and this is really smooth. Very nice, and legibility's good. It just looks really good. It's pleasant to write with in a note-taking situation or writing. It's just a pleasure to write with, something you would look forward to writing with. Next, I've got another 78G, this time with a medium nib. Had a little bit of a hard start there. But it's a smooth writer. Not a lot of difference between how these two felt, the fine and the medium. They're both very smooth. And next I'm going to switch over to Sailor. This is the Sailor LeCool. It's the same size and dimension as a Pro Gear Slim, but the fit and finish of it is just a little bit more inexpensive. It's a nice feeling pen. It's got a very plain nib. It's got the same nib that comes on the Sailor Compass that, as of the filming of this video, is just being released here in the United States. The difference between the Compass and the LeCool is the Compass has rounded ends, and the ones that are being sold here in the US are nice vibrant colors that might be appropriate for a student. I'm having some hard start issues. This ink doesn't feel dry. This is a medium fine nib. Now, this nib, I don't always feel that it's that pleasant to use. It really depends on the ink you put in it. And this ink feels nice, but I had that hard start up here, but I had the same thing with the Pilot. Let's see. I'll go ahead and put, these this style of nib from Sailor, it's not as smooth as the Pilot entry-level nibs. I don't know how to describe it. The nib does not feel round. It doesn't feel scratchy. It just doesn't feel smooth. I don't know. But it's not, with this ink, it's not bad. It didn't feel bad. Now the next pen I'm going to be test writing with is my Lamy CP1. Now this, I wouldn't call this an entry-level student pen, but it does use Lamy stainless steel nibs, which, you know, a student may want to use a Lamy Safari or a Lamy AL. What is it, just the Lamy AL? But they've got the interchangeable nibs, which I think makes these a good choice for students. So it would write like, a Safari is going to write like this CP1. Now, this nib, it's an extra fine, but see how much broader it's writing than these first four nibs, which are Japanese made pens, and the Lamy's a German made pen. It's got some feedback, but the nib just feels different. Like the LaCool just felt like it was shaped weird. This one feels like it's shaped nicely, but there's some feedback. But it's, I would still say that it's nice. It's very pleasant to write with. But that's as fine as you're going to get on a Lamy, the extra fine. Next, I have a Kaweco Perkeo, which has that triangular grip. Is a nice student pen, and it's comfortable and inexpensive. Hard start there too. That's odd. I would not have imagined that this ink would be one that hard starts, because it doesn't feel dry at all. Now, this Perkeo and the Lamy CP1 feel pretty much identical in the way the nib glides across the paper. There's feedback there, but it feels nice. And finally, I've got a Jinhao X750, and it's got the original Jinhao medium nib in it. And it's a little bit more narrow than the Perkeo medium. And I find that these Jinhao nibs, which I don't have a whole lot of experience with them, I have two X750s, and this one appears to be the nib that was nice and smooth, pretty wet. But the other one, on my other X750, just didn't feel right. It wasn't scratchy. It just felt like it was misshapen. All right, now while that is drying, I'll take a look at some writing samples on other papers. I've got my ARC notebook paper, and it performed just fine. Let me see if I had any hard, I don't notice any hard starts here. This is a more absorbent paper though, so this paper may grab the ink and, you know, draw it to the paper a little easier. I really liked that fine Pilot nib. That's one of my favorites for just a regular note-taking situation. I like the legibility of it, but it's not just too bold. But that's a personal preference of how bold you want your line to be. Now the Jinhao, this was what I wrote just after I inked it up. It didn't feel that great on this paper, but it may have been because I had just inked it up. It looks okay. On my Rhodia paper, let's see, everything looked pretty nice. My Sailor LaCool, I wrote here, I was writing at a higher angle to see if it felt a little better. And I just put a question mark there. I don't know. Like I said, it just feels like there's something weird about the shape of the nib. My Lamy CP1 started having hard starts. The Kaweco did nicely. And my Jinhao felt nice on this smooth Rhodia paper. And finally, on 20-pound copy paper, something that you may be using a lot of as a student. My extra fine felt a little scratchy. Now, the fine nib, it felt good. The medium nib, it's maybe wanting to feather just a little bit, feather and spread. I think I liked the fine nib better. The Sailor LeCool is a medium fine, so the fine and the medium fine, they both felt nice on this paper. I've got that the Perkeo and the CP1 had feedback, but it was nice feedback. The Jinhao was nice. It was nice and smooth. Now my Perkeo started having the issues with hard starts. I'm not sure what's causing that. And finally, back to our Tomoe River paper. There is, this dries on the paper. It's not really like a different color sheen. It just dries kind of glossy on the paper. So one thing I don't like about inks that do that, it's hard to tell when it's dry. On most of my fountain pen inks, I'll look at them, and if it's still shiny, I know it's still wet, but you can't do that with this one. But all of these on Tomoe River paper felt nice and smooth. It would just be a matter of how bold of a line do you want for your note taking or your homework. All right. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.